First arc, Slapping the Business Giant. Chapter 1. He opened his eyes once again. Zhou Yunsheng found himself lying on a soft, king-sized bed. Above his head was a snow-white ceiling and a gorgeous crystal lamp. He half sat up and found that the AI, which was bound to his soul, was now quietly encircling his wrist. Uninterrupted writing emerged on the display. It was a detailed data about his new body, stolen from the Lord God's system. In order to conduct himself as a virus capable of evading the Lord God's monitoring, Zhou Yunsheng naturally would attach himself to the main players in the dimension, in other words, the male and female protagonists. As accurately calculated by 007, his best choice was to become data that would be destroyed sooner or later, commonly known as cannon fodder. Changing the fate of cannon fodder, although it wouldn't lead to the collapse of the dimension, it would cause an error in the Lord God's calculations. One data error could give rise to a series of data errors. After he leaves, the world would already be out of the Lord God's control, like in the gray area of a brain. Although it looked okay, it was actually already necrotic, and the more the gray area multiplied, the brain would sooner or later be paralyzed. This was the result Zhou Yunsheng ultimately wanted. After reading the information, the corner of his mouth raised slightly as he ruminated. This body was 16 years old, also called Zhou Yunsheng, and he was the Zhou group's first son. He was a first-year student and had two younger brothers in third year of middle school, both 15 years old. One called Zhou Wen'ang and the other was called Zhou Wenjing. On the surface, Zhou Wen'ang was Zhou Yunsheng's full sibling, but in reality he was a child from his father's mistress' true love, substituted into the family during his mother's postnatal weakness. Zhou Yunsheng's real brother died at birth because of hypoplasia of the heart. On the other hand, Zhou Wenjing was born from the female university student who was sponsored by Zhou's mother. That woman was an orphan and she was kind-hearted. Racked with guilt over Zhou's mother, she fell into depression soon after she gave birth and slit her wrists and committed suicide a few years later. The body was discovered by Zhou's mother. It's unknown whether this stimulated her, but a year later she jumped into the sea, her dead body unrecoverable. The protagonist of this world was Zhou family's second son, Zhou Wenjing. He was suppressed by the family from childhood and persecuted by his brothers. Then he finally counterattacked and became a business emperor. He defeated countless opponents, experienced one thrilling trade war after another, then finally ascended to the pinnacle of power and wealth. As for Zhou Yunsheng, he was merely another small stumbling block in his life's path. He couldn't even be called an opponent. Of Zhou family's three sons, the first was calm and sophisticated, the second was eccentric, and the third was simple and straightforward. However, the first son, who looked the most outstanding and shrewd, was in reality the most stupid. He treated Zhou Wen'ang as a full-blooded younger brother, taking care of him to the point of stupidity. He even bullied Zhou Wenjing under the other's instigation, and the obviously partial Zhou father didn't interfere. Under Zhou father's deliberate guidance, he became a defensive shield for Zhou Wen'ang. In the end, he not only had to bear Zhou Wenjing's revenge, even his share of the family property was stolen by Zhou Wen'ang. He was destitute for all his life and died miserable. This was simply a standard cannon fodder role. After reading the information, Zhou Yunsheng lazily stretched his waist, then walked to the huge French window to bask in the morning sun. His more accurate than 007 brain was rapidly calculating how best to change the fate of the original owner. Since he was here, he would seriously face life, not treating it as an imaginary world and not treating it irrelevant like a game. This was a world created by the Lord God. It was an aggregate of countless data, different from a heterodimensional space in the real world. However, he was also a string of data, more specifically, the codified creation of a soul. So to him, the world feels no different from the real thing. The heartache born of the anger of betrayal and the pain of being killed again and again, they were not inferior to the real world. In fact, because the memories were deeply rooted in his soul, they were even more profound than reality. He didn't want to be a puppet for the Lord God to fiddle with again. Since he was here, he would do everything in his ability to subvert fate and live for himself. At this moment, the sun hid behind the clouds, and the smooth glass windows reflected the teenager's handsome, determined face. Shang Chao, breakfast is ready, time to get up. Just then, the nanny knocked on the door. Zhou Yunsheng put away his determined spirit, rehung a gentle and an elegant smile, then followed the original owner's body to change into his school uniform, running downstairs for breakfast after washing up. In the dining room, Zhou's father was sitting in the main position, reading the newspapers. Zhou Wen'ang was lying on his shoulder, his neck stretched out. When he saw Zhou's father about to flip the page, he quickly pressed down the newspaper, shouting out that he wasn't done reading. Zhou's father just smiled helplessly, then lovingly pinched the tip of his son's nose. This kind of tenderness did the eldest son, Zhou Yunsheng, ever receive that? But he was brainwashed by Zhou's father to always think that the best of everything should be given to his younger brother. Taking care of his brother was his duty. Take care, huh? The current Zhou Yunsheng would naturally take good care of Zhou Wen'ang. The corner of his mouth raised up, making the smile on his face appear more gentle and sincere. Zhou Yunsheng sat on Zhou's father's left, indifferently glancing at Zhou Wenjing, whose head was lowered in thoughts only he could know. Yang Shao, drink a glass of milk every day. Zhou's father's personal assistant, Du Shulang, came out from the kitchen and placed a cup of steaming milk in front of him, blocking his view of Zhou Wenjing. Zhou Yunsheng's smile deepened, his dark eyes flashing a sharp light. He almost forgot his current opponent in the Zhou family wasn't only the protagonist Zhou Wenjing, there was also the male supporting actor Du Zhulang. Without him, Zhou Wenjing would not have been so overwhelmingly powerful in 10 years. Basically, he was Zhou Wenjing's gold finger, his biggest cheat.